Hello and welcome to another show. Since the last episode, I attended Broadmeadows Magistrates Court in relation to impersonation of a government official, which I'm pleading not guilty to. The case was adjourned for a summary conference with prosecution. I'm in the process of organising that. My next court date is on October 24th. Any support is much appreciated. There's links in the description for how you can go about doing that. But on to today's show. I have a very special guest. Former New Zealand candidate Billy Te Kahika is joining us. We're here to discuss his arrest, the ongoing situation with the New Zealand freedom movement, and the tyranny that everyone is experiencing there from government and its media partners. So let's cross over to that interview now. Hi, Billy. I'm proud to welcome you onto the show. What you've done for the New Zealand people is truly remarkable, and you've been through hell and back in the process. How are you managing there today?
Really good, and thanks for having me on your show. It's great to be with you, Jeff. As you've been watching things unfold here in New Zealand, I've been watching things unfold in Australia and, of course, in Victoria, and have been watching the tyranny that you've been living under with Premier Andrews. But I'm holding up well. We're still involved in a court case for protest charges. The government has levelled two types of charges against me. The first charge is for protesting against lockdown harm, which I did in 2021 on August the 18th. As you'll be aware, I've got a significant amount of profile in New Zealand, and I've heard from so many people about the harm that lockdowns cause and were causing, suicide, business destruction, marriage ending, relationships ending, all that sort of stuff. And I felt compelled when they announced another level 4 lockdown to stand up against the harm and to try and fight for a voice for the New Zealand people that were basically pleading with the government to take note that the harm that they're causing with the lockdowns was far out of proportion. The lockdowns was, basically just monumental. The government weren't listening. I felt compelled to protest about the harm, and subsequently got arrested for it. But on that day, I want to make special tribute. I live in a very rural part of North New Zealand, and on the first day of the lockdown, we had a 14-year-old girl in my community hang herself because of lockdown anxiety, and that's the very thing that I wanted to protest about, and I was arrested for that. And normally what they were doing, they would sort of arrest someone and release them after a couple of hours or so. They kept me in New Zealand's largest prison for about 28 hours, and with no intention of letting me go. We had a judge that basically wasn't prepared to keep me indefinitely, and he got me out. We had incredibly harsh bail conditions, myself and my partner in crime, Vinnie Eastwood, and we're still living through that today.
You held a protest during the level 4 lockdowns and simply outlining the devastation caused, and then you've been unfairly targeted.
Yeah, that's essentially that's the core of it. It was a very small protest, about 80 of us, and I'd always worked with the police. I'm a former member of the New Zealand Army and New Zealand Police. I was volunteer for the volunteer firefighting service. Making sure that public protesters and police were safe was a primary concern of mine. Always when doing protests, I worked with the police. They sort of made out that we were all going to be fine, and that they would warn me and tell me to stop, and if I didn't, I might be subject to arrest. I was arrested, and then instead of being released after 2 or 3 hours, they kept me in for 28 hours. And the police opposed bail. They wanted to keep me in until I was going to basically buckle under and admit guilt to something. But the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990, Jeff, guarantees the right to peaceful assembly and the right to freedom of expression and speech. And so I claim that, and either the Bill of Rights is a guarantor and a protector of a citizen's rights and protection from government overreach, or it's not. And we're about to find out about that. I'm facing a second group of charges as well. They've trumped up charges to do with the Electoral Act in New Zealand. I stood for election in 2020 at the New Zealand general elections. I led the largest freedom party ever constructed in the shortest amount of time in history. I was voted the third preferred prime minister in a very, very serious Commonwealth Brunton news poll. From there, we had 60 candidates. I had 80,000 people in our support network. We had the third largest amount of candidates, of members in the party. And then at the end of it, they told us we had 30,000 votes, which just didn't add up because, I mean, simply, 2 months out from the election, we had about 6.5 million people engagements in the messaging. And most of that was supportive. And then, seriously, big movement. But at the end of it, we got, they told us that we got 30,000 votes, which we felt far beyond worried about that now. But and now they've claimed that I knowingly fiddled my declarations for the electoral declarations that you got to do after the election, which of course I wouldn't. And I worked with the Electoral Commission to submit my report, and they knowingly helped me to get it right, because I'm a smart man, but I'm not good at all things, and report writing like that is not my forte at all. And I worked with the Electoral Commission to do that, and then at the end of it, because it took me 3 times to get it right, and they allowed me to submit my report 3 times, they then reported me to the police for breaching the Electoral Act for submitting my report 3 times to get it right. So that case hasn't been seen until February. So I'm starting to feel a bit picked on, Jeff.
Yes, it definitely appears that way. And all your amazing accomplishments, being a front runner for the New Zealand Prime Minister, and they obviously seen you as a threat. And we know corruption is rife all throughout the political system. They didn't want you to threaten the establishment and everything that's been put in place. Jacinda Ardern, with everything that she's been coached on with the World Economic Forum, they didn't want you to come through and rock the boat and stand up for human rights. That's exactly how it looks, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, because what I'd done is I basically identified every tentacle of the evil octopus, if you like. I looked at and exposed, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Agenda 2050. I exposed the World Economic Forum program. I exposed, the climate change tyranny that was coming down the pipeline, consistencies, contradictions, and dishonesty with that. And but it wasn't just limited to that. It was also far beyond that, where I was talking about sensible economics, just applying logical thought to how we can run a country much better for the citizenry, so that the citizens of New Zealand actually have a voice and are heard. But what we do have in New Zealand, very similar to Australia, we have a corporate system. It's a beast. It's ignorant to the concerns of any citizen in New Zealand, and it's on a program. And I basically talked about all of that, thinking that I was the only nut job that was thinking it. But out of that, literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people joined me on the rally, and still remains at the moment the key tool that they're using to destroy rights and freedoms. But as I'm telling everyone now, get ready for climate change, because it's coming. Climate change tyranny is going to be the one that'll finish the job.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's a multifaceted plan to restrict our rights and liberties. And you've been on the forefront doing your best for the people there, and the support has been overwhelming. Many people are definitely on your side. And yeah, the system there, they don't like that. Anyone that's trying to step in and interfere with Agenda 21, they do their best to try and silence and eliminate their political opponents. It's very much dirty politics that you're immersed in, isn't it?
Oh, it's filthy. And the thing that's most surprising really is how dirty it is, even amongst the so-called freedom fighting political leaders. It's to me, the very thing that we are opposing, which is arrogancy, which is self-serving nepotism, coming from a place of hatred, coming from a place of self-centeredness, centralization are the things that we are meant to be opposing. Yet we now have players and actors in the so-called freedom movement that are displaying the exact same traits of which we're trying to combat, and that's basically, what I've been promoting lately is that I believe that New Zealand freedom movement has been hijacked. I believe it's been twisted out of shape into something that's completely different to what we had in 2020. And now what we need now is a truth movement, because the truth can't be argued with. And I'm not talking about my truth or your truth, Jeff. It's the truth that I'm talking about. And whichever way you kind of skin the cat, truth is truth. And I believe that that's the foundation of any good freedom movement. I'm a pastor, and I believe what the Bible says, that that if we seek the truth, that's a good thing, because the truth will set us free and make us free.
It certainly will, and unfortunately, that seems to be a common theme all throughout. And people stepping in, controlled opposition, infiltration, those that are coming through to hijack the movement for their own ends and means, and trying to censor and silence others. What we've seen here is long-term veterans of the movement, and they've been pushed aside and not being given certain privileges to speak. And it's affecting so many people on different levels. And that's been a common theme right throughout history, unfortunately. Now, during this whole protest, the government has been desperate to silence both you and Vinny, and even preventing you both from speaking to one another. Their fear of the exposure from independent media. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, exactly. So we've just had that bail condition lifted. So we're working together. We're working on a documentary right now, which is going to expose government and media corruption and collusion and misinforming and manipulating public perception, etc. around. Going back to the point you just made, Jeff, about the controlled opposition and how they are squeezing out long-term activists and controlling who speaks, controlling what's being said, how it's being said. That's exactly what's happened here. We've got two organisations, one called the Freedom and Rights Coalition and one called Voices for Freedom. And, they've done exactly that. They've tried to corporatise and centralise the entire freedom movement into their organisations. And, they won't let anyone speak at any rally that they are running. And, for example, if I turned up, and I was certainly, at the very, very forefront, and, I don't think anybody's really got the same, or had the same amount of profile that I had at that time in 2020. They wouldn't let me speak at a rally like that. We've got instances where these same organisations won't let their people go to other rallies ran by other people like myself. They've got to sort of pre-approve what they put on their protest cards, all that sort of stuff. And to me, there's a difference between centralisation and coordination. Coordination is no problem, but what they've done is for their own purposes. And I don't think those purposes and motivations that they have are genuine. I think there's something behind it. And I think it's about self-serving, which is very concerning. And they've set up these organisations, and they've basically hijacked the entire freedom movement. I mean, we've even got a media channel here called the Platform, which is ran by one of our long-term radio journalists, Sean Plunkett. Now, Sean Plunkett in 2020 was one of the greatest enemies to the freedom movement and to our plight, to get the truth out there, to wake people up. I mean, he was a bitter enemy of ours. And now he's created the Platform, and he's promoting himself as resistance media. And I just cannot believe, and he's actually working with those same organizations that are trying to manipulate and control the freedom movement. He's working with them. And that, to me, it kind of smells like a dead fish, Jeff.
It is a horrific problem, and I've witnessed it here. The extensive lengths that people go to, the people that have infiltrated the community, trying to stop others, even holding events on different days. And even in the beginning, when they stepped in, a lot of people made no effort to introduce themselves to veteran activists. There was no communication. If anything, it was quite the opposite. It falls back into the divide and conquer techniques that are being used. And it's definitely counterproductive when this is all put in place, and smear campaigns that are put over the top, as well as egos, people jockeying for donations and subscribers. They lose sight of the goal, which is to restore peace and prosperity back to the country. It's very vicious and very sad to see, isn't it?
Oh, it is, and that's the thing. You know, I mean, everybody that started this work in 2020 did it at great risk. And, you know, I've lost my international performing career out of it. I've lost my business, you know, immeasurable amount of slander and harm, lost so-called friends, even lost family, and, you know, and lost an income. So back then, you know, it was the people that started to support me and basically so I could feed my family and myself. And then, you know, then suddenly, you know, people sort of twigged on it that, oh, hold on a second, we can capitalize on this. And next minute, you've got these same organizations that I've mentioned that are, you know, have got professional merchandising aspects to the organization, you know, and, you know, taking, you know, money from people when it's done on a corporate basis, rather than a basis where, well, actually it's the cause that first. Secondly, I love to pay my bills and feed my family, you know, and but to them it's the other way around. And really, what they're jockeying for at the end of it is the 2023 general elections next year, and it's going to be a dog's breakfast. And you know, I mean, quite frankly, Jeff, in my humble opinion of how I've assessed each of these so-called freedom leaders, is that they're just incapable, and it really does concern me that you know, they're incapable from a technical point of view, but in a leadership point of view. But on the other hand, you know, just where are their hearts? And that's probably the first thing you'd be looking for in a candidate that you want to put into any position of authority. Is, you know, where is their heart? Where, you know, where they're coming from. And one of the things I say quite often is the best person to have a job of authority is the very person who doesn't want it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good saying, and it rings a lot of truth as well. And ultimately, as a result, what we've seen is different groups being fractured off, and people following individual campaigns, doing podcasts by themselves, circulating petitions, or just working in small, tight-knit groups instead of everybody coming together. So, you know, in saying that, we did have a good show of support up in Canberra. We went to Parliament House in Australia, and it seemed like some people were putting their differences aside for the greater good. We still have to remain hopeful and positive, and try not to be distracted by some of the negative energy that comes forward, and focus on our own situation, legal.
Absolutely.
And the campaigns that we're on. A lot of prominent figures like ourselves as well have been hit with numerous charges, and they've used that tactic here, charge stacking in Australia, trying to weigh people down with court cases to try and slow down the progress. And we got the courts all clogged here up in Australia. I'd imagine it'd be the same there. People with breach of chief health officers' directives, and just an ongoing stream of cases before the courts. Is that the situation at hand there?
Yeah, it's exactly the same here. I mean, there's literally hundreds of people that are facing different, what we have, Health Response Act breaches, and it is clogged up. I mean, meanwhile, you've got, you know, gang members, you know, that are getting let off crimes. You've got them not being chased up, you followed through, and they're focusing on people like myself that have never ever been in trouble with the law, I mean, jeepers, last time I got a growling from a policeman, I was 16, 17 years of age. I'm 50 now. And I've, since then I've swum a lot of water, going under the bridge. And, I've never been in trouble with the law that way. And to be in front of a court at the age of 50 is something, I would never have thought of, as being possible in my life, really. But the system, the court system's very, very clogged up. You've got, like my case now and Vinny's case. I mean, we were arrested on August the 18th. We're now well into September. We found out yesterday that we won't know the verdict for our charges until the 25th of November. And each time that we have an appearance and our lawyers have to work, well, mine anyway, that's $3,000 a pop. Yeah. And, I don't have a guaranteed income as such. It's a donation amount of work that I do. What I say to people is, look, if you want to support me in my freedom work, research and broadcasting, my ministry or my legal fees, this is how you support me, and I'll provide them my working bank account so that I can do this job. And I've got a lot of beautiful people supporting me, but it's so far it's cost about $20,000, and it's going to be more by the time they're finished with me. So I think these are measure of not only having the court system clogged up, but I think they're using just financial attrition to wear us down.
Yes, it's very much corrupt the way that whole system is structured, and you deserve all the support and donations you can get, because a win for you is a win for all of New Zealand. And your impeccable history and all your accomplishments, that should have been factored in, and then you should have been shown immense leniency at court. You shouldn't have never had to have done any time behind bars. What was the treatment that you received in the New Zealand prison system?
The way they treated me in Mount Eden, and even the way they arrested me, was with great respect. The police themselves, let me film right up until the moment I stepped into a police paddy wagon. They handcuffed me from the front. They didn't even, they were very, very respectful. In the prison as well as in the remand centre, people took sort of selfies with me, a couple of the staff members. I had a sergeant there who took pretty good care of me. He was ex-army like myself as well. And they were all very respectful. All of them wanted me out of there. None of them wanted me in there. I can tell you that. The prison staff, remand staff, and all that, they're all very good, and they're all pleased that I got bail, because they knew that I didn't belong there. All of them knew that I didn't belong there, and so it's going to be very, very interesting to see what the outcome is. Myself and Vinny are facing up to 6 months prison, or a $4,000 fine for one charge and $1,000 for another. So if we don't go to prison and they give us a $5,000 fine, that'll be on top of the, probably $25,000 that we've got to pay in legal expenses. So it's, that's of course distressing in itself there. But I've got great faith in the Lord that He's going to take care of myself and my family. And I've got lots of people from all sort of backgrounds praying for me. That's for sure, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, that's positive, and always look at the bright side, even in a dark situation like this. But yeah, I'd imagine many sleepless nights and all the court appearances. It definitely adds to a lot of stress, and it can really take its toll. Are you positive that you will be successful and get a good verdict when it comes down to it?
I think I could go 50-50 myself. I mean, to me, the greater issue here is whether the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990 is what it purports itself to be. And, this New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990 is the guarantor of a citizen's rights, and it's the protector from government tyranny and overreach, like what we've seen. The tragic irony of this particular part is that the government now knows, and the world has admitted, the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, that lockdowns were never going to prevent anything. There was a they were never going to work. And there was a study from the Johns Hopkins Economic University that came out a couple of weeks ago, and it said that the lockdowns globally, and certainly from the United States point of view, probably prevented about 0.2% of deaths and harm. So that's nothing. You might as well say it's zero. And yet the harms of the lockdowns themselves were massive. We had in the last year 5,600 Kiwi kids aged between 10 and 17 were admitted in New Zealand emergency rooms because of self-harm anxiety. They tried to harm themselves.
Absolutely, and the whole mental health system has been overburdened with that. It's catastrophic. And another level on top of tyranny is the police brutality. We cop the full brunt of it here in Melbourne.
I know.
With the New World Order being implemented, they didn't discriminate, whether it was elderly. We had grandmothers, grandparents, children screaming and crying, people being capsicum sprayed, the chemical agents used, and they were just hunting and stalking anyone down that wasn't wearing a mask. Did you witness the exact same horror or something along those lines?
Yeah, we did, but not to the same scale. We had, a friend of mine in Christchurch in the South Island. He got viciously assaulted by police for not wearing a mask, even though he had a mask exemption certificate. And there's been a few people sort of done over like that, but nothing with the same intensity as what you went through in Victoria. I mean, Premier Andrews needs to be held up and held accountable for this. I mean, there's no doubt that he's a criminal. He's of the same ilk as Jacinda Ardern, as Justin Trudeau, as any one of them of the woke nouveau communist socialist sort of young global leader, and he needs to be held accountable. It's amazing, actually. It makes me wonder how after he's been the premier, how he will ever be able to walk around Victoria without somebody wanting to have a piece of him.
That's right. The audacity from some of these tyrants, it really is beyond belief how they can show their face in public after the damage that they've caused. And it'll take years for many people to recover. The post-traumatic stress will remain, people with night terrors, and they'll never be able to properly recover from this. It truly is heart-wrenching to see. And no matter what side of the board you're on, when you look at it, the restrictions, a lot of it was not warranted. And a lot of people can see that. Now, the freedom movement, do you see that there's hope that they'll be able to restructure, re-strategize, and get back on track, and we can hopefully see the end of any division?
I'd like to, I wish I could say yes to that. I don't believe so. Unfortunately, Jeff, I really don't. I mean, the lack of clarity and maturity around some of these leaders, and it staggers me that, I pleaded with every so-called independent minor party in 2020 to join me. Mm-hmm. And I was absolutely willing to be a co-leader in an arrangement, and not one of them would. Every one of them said no for various, excuses and reasons. And now they're trying to rebadge themselves and rebrand themselves as people that, no. Well, we want to unify, but they won't. You'll have there's two organisations, Freedom and Rights Coalition and Voices for Freedom. They're working behind the scenes together on a political party. There's a couple of minor parties that are joining that. But the thing is that, I will be campaigning against them, not to be in the election, but we don't want these types of people in the government. Why? Because I've always said this, Jeff, that we don't want to replace one bunch of nutters down in Parliament with another bunch of nutters, and self-serving, self-centered, unstable individuals. We don't want that. We've had enough of that. We've had a lifetime of that. We've had decades, hundreds of years of it. But directly to that question, I wish we could see it, but what I would love to see, I'll go at another way to answer your question like this. What I'd like to see is that there were some fresh people that came along with really good hearts, really good capabilities that could come along who really had a plan to not only restore rights and freedoms, but to also deal with the very untidy, hard to address issues such as geoengineering, the 5G issue, and so on and so forth. But also, aside from that, have real sensible and really good plans around international trade, economics, finances, decoupling from the central bank digital currency system that's coming down, but replacing it with something better as an option. Health. How can we get a better health system? How can we get a better education system? How can we help low-income people? All that sort of stuff. So really, what you need is you don't need a one-trick pony party. You need somebody or a group of people that will come in and have a range of issues dealt with that kind of makes them offer a greater bang for your buck, as it were. And I don't see that at the moment. You've got people that, we've got the outdoors party, who were absolutely terrible to me in 2020. And as the name suggests, they're outdoor protection and access protection sort of activists. So I guess what I would like to see happen in the next election is that, to summarize really what I was saying before, were people that had their hearts in the right places, but understood the issues, that it's not just about the freedom issues themselves, but each one of them needs to be addressed one at a time, whether it be the World Economic Forum, climate change, tyranny, carbonized economy development, green economy development, whether it be the UN agendas or the Great Reset of the World Economic Forum. We need to look at those and decouple from them. But there's also, a huge amount of other issues that are important as well. The economic and educational well-being of the country. The health sector has been destroyed by this current socialist communist government. It's eradicated, and we're expecting a lot of people to die because of it. These also, there are environmental issues in New Zealand that we need to take care of. I mean, I'm an environmentalist, but I'm not a green communist. Mm-hmm. And, I live in the country. I love our beautiful nature that we have in New Zealand, and it's stunning, and it needs to be looked after and maintained. I've got no problem with any of that. But when you start imposing, the so-called climate change initiative and dishonesty and tyranny into the environmental topic, you're starting to conflate the two issues and merge them together into a different platform. And what they've done in New Zealand now, they've created the New Zealand Climate Change Commission, and these are literally green red communists, and they are simply evil. And so what you've got to be able to do is, if you're going to take something away, come up with the philosophical and business case behind what you propose to replace it with, but do it with what I really want to see is a bunch of really capable people that are fresh, coming together and leading the concerned citizens of New Zealand into a political grouping, if you like, and ones that are really have all the leadership abilities, but they have their hearts in the right place to never ever forget that they're there to serve the people. The other thing as well is, I believe that, the Bible tells me, Jeff, that there's no stopping what is coming out in the pipeline. But I do believe in New Zealand that we do have an opportunity unique to our country to be able to change our system because of the Indigenous agreements that we had that were signed in the middle 1800s, and that are still lawful and legal documents that can be applied. But I would certainly advocate that people look at working towards replacing this corrupt corporate system that we have. But I think the first place is to find a group of people that are not there about themselves, they're about serving the people, but they've got real skills and real nous.
Very well said. And I believe that's an important point you raised, because there's so many worthy causes that we should be directing our energy into, but we really must prioritize and focus on the immediate danger. See, there we have environmental issues, geoengineering, medical tyranny, police brutality. There's a lot of people that are directing their efforts into exposing a lot of the sex offenders in Parliament. We have suppression orders. A lot of people are directing their energy into that, exposing the Freemasonic influence in politics as well. But yeah, as all of these matters present themselves, we must focus on the immediate threat and tackle it that way. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, there's that phrase "clear and present danger"
Yes.
is a good thing to go back to, because when you've got somebody pointing a gun at your head, now you're not going to be worrying about the cannon may come down tomorrow at you, but you got to worry about the gun that's pointed to your head now. And what we're seeing in New Zealand with our government, the way that the system is operating, is that I really do believe that next year we'll likely have a major party government change. So Ardern and the Labour Communists will go out, and then what you will have is the National Party, so-called Conservative centre-right party come in, but they'll bring a stronger sense of globalism and corporate fascism into the mix. See, what people haven't identified here in New Zealand is how the ideologies work together. Communism, communism is the base ideology. It's the master base. Socialism is the little brother. Fascism is the corporate strength. Is the corporate strength which gives communism its terrible power. And and what we have in New Zealand, I believe, are people that actually haven't quite figured that out. But next year, when this government swaps over, we're going to have to really know our game about how we're going to be dealing with a new type of enemy.
Yeah. And what would you say to people that have lost all hope in the political system? They believe that candidates are selected and not elected. They don't believe in the voting system. And once people are put in positions of power, we see a lot of broken promises as well. How could you set somebody at ease when they have a lot of negative when it comes to that?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit like that myself, actually, to be honest. I think you've really got to look at where the solutions really will make a difference. One would be to completely replace the system, but how do you do that? You're going to have to somehow bring back the authority of these documents that I was referring to earlier. Some of the Māori documents that we have that are absolutely ratifiable lawful agreements. They're not pretend, and they're not airy-fairy, wispy sort of documents. They really do have the strength of law behind them. But the problem is we've got such a divided Māoridom or Indigenous family here in New Zealand that I can't see that coming together anytime soon. I think there's other things you can do. You can perhaps lead a movement for a vote of no confidence in the system and in the government. I think that's something worthy. I think if we have to try and persevere with what we've got to try and affect some sort of protection and some change, then really you have to try and peer through the cloud of mystery around people. I mean, I had people claim about me that I was a UN secret agent, I was a Chinese Communist Party secret agent, that I was a Freemason because I was in Canada at an Indigenous business meeting, and I got introduced to Justin Trudeau, and he shook my hand like a little 12-year-old girl. Now, the way that I was brought up is that when you shake hand with a man, you shake hand in the cusp of their hand like that properly, like straight on, and you shake it firmly and you do it properly. But he grabbed my hand like that, the classic sort of Freemasonry grip, and there's not much you can do about it when somebody does that to you. You can't pull out of it. It's done, and no evidence at all of ever been connected to Freemasonry. In fact, as a truther broadcaster and as a pastor, I actually have done many lectures against Freemasonry and have exposed Freemasonry a lot. The other thing I was accused of was being funded by a secret billionaire to destabilize the freedom movement. But I think what happened was, after the election, I think people really woke up to themselves and went, oh, okay, no, he's not. And then you get arrested and no, you're not. And then you lose just about everything. And then they kind of start to work out that you can't be controlled opposition, because if you are, you're getting treated pretty badly for someone who is. But I think what people have to try and discern who the best bet is, and that's a very, very hard one. I mean, looking across the political landscape now in New Zealand, I can't really put my finger on anyone that I would trust. There's probably one woman actually that I would think that she probably has got her heart in the right place in particular, but she's part of a party that doesn't. But you know, really the whole thing around politicians is that I've never liked them. I don't trust them, and especially those that will change their integrity on a dime. And I think it's very, very hard for people to find people like that. Whereas I think the thing with me that surprised me in 2020, I had massive profile and support, but the thing that surprised me, I never had that phone call from someone saying, Billy, we want to meet you, and by the way, here's a big brown bag full of money for you to go away and crawl away. You know, and I don't think that call came because they knew that I couldn't be bought.
Yes, absolutely. It looks that way, and there's so much credibility. All your work speaks for itself. Any false accusations or any statements that you've been compromised, I wouldn't take that personal. It's just the murky water that you're swimming in, and so many people have had their trust broken. They feel betrayed. So it's hard to rebuild that. But yes, that's no fault of your own. That's no reflection of yourself. And you've made so many sacrifices for New Zealand, doing prison time and talking the talk and walking the walk as well. So yes, you should be able to hold your head up high knowing that. And people's actions speak louder than their words, and you should feel good about that. What type of feedback and what type of support is flooding it at the moment?
Yeah, so every day I get loads of messages. I've got people that are concerned. I've got people wanting to offer to try and fundraise for me, and because I'm probably, if I was fundraising for someone else, I'd be highly effective, but I'm not too flash with it on my own because I find myself get a bit shy. The Māori word for shyness in New Zealand is a word called whakama. Whakama means it's a mixture of shy, embarrassment to ask for help. But people are fantastic that way. I mean, the other week I asked for testimonies about what my work has done for people, and I had hundreds of them come in, and I took those to court with me, and didn't get an opportunity to table them, but I had them with me, and the file was about that thick. And so I know that I've reached out to a lot of people and helped a lot of people, but I do want to make mention that my wife and children have really sacrificed huge amounts as well with me. They really, really have. I mean, we had a beautiful home early last year that we had to sell, because too many people knew where we were and we were getting threats, and we didn't have I don't have a regular income to pay the same level of mortgage that I had at that time. But my wife is a very strong woman. My children are. They know what we're standing for, and we as a family, we consider ourselves a missionary family, and we're always trying to work out ways that we can help and serve people. But we also know that evil needs to be called out, and that's what they've seen their dad and husband do for over now.
Yes, there's so much to factor in, and it can feel like the odds are definitely stacked against you through a lot of this, but having faith in the Lord and staying positive, that can give you a lot of strength, and you can really overcome some enormous obstacles that, you never thought you'd be able to. That's what we've experienced here. People that, they didn't think they were cut out for the battle. It showed when they can harness and muster up some of the strength and the courage that they've got. People can really surprise themselves at just what they can endure, can't they?
Oh, you did right there, Jeff. And what I always say to people in the freedom movement and truth movement is that we need to keep calm and keep the peace in our spirit. And for me, I'm very blessed and fortunate that my peace and calm comes from faith in the Lord. And but I guess the central hub of my message to people is stay calm, stay cool, factual, on solid ground. Don't go down the rabbit holes that are going to lead you into a deeper state of depression. There are so many claims on the internet that aren't substantiated that if you believe, they'll just, you'll be jumping off the nearest bridge. I'll give you a little example of that. About 2 months ago, we had, a so-called freedom fighting lady take to the airways, and she promoted that the following week we're going to go into a nationwide military lockdown, that the police and army were going to go into schools and literally kidnap and confiscate our children. That was unbelievable. This woman had gone down the rabbit hole and basically told an absolute fictitious story and had nothing to back it up, no information to back it up, no proof of source and source of proof. And I worked for about a good solid 2 weeks to keep people calm after that and to explain why it wasn't going to happen that way. And it didn't, and it hasn't. It's not to say that it may not in the future. I'm not ruling anything out with this totalitarian regime that we're dealing with. But the fact is, this woman had caused such hysteria because she wasn't cool, calm, factual, on solid ground. And so we need to be like that. We must be like that, because if we don't, we'll be led down any strange rabbit hole, and that's what we can't do.
Very important advice. It's sensible to keep a level head during these difficult times. Sadly, when dealing with psychopathic dictators, a lot of people cannot rule anything out, and fear-based mind control, some people get paralyzed with fear, and then they can jump to the worst case scenario, and that can be detrimental to the overall goal, can't it? And that's what you witnessed there.
Oh yeah, look, because of the wrong type of misinformation that some of the so-called freedom fighting broadcasters put out there, I've got no doubt it's caused massive harm. And some of it, I think, is controlled opposition doing it to discredit the entire freedom movement and truth movement by creating a white noise where it's hard for people to decipher and distinguish between absolute nut job plant material versus the truth and improvable information that's credible, that is going to warn people. And I think that's been a consistent strategy of intelligence services or corrupt agencies that are working along this sort of train of activity to try and destabilize and confuse the freedom movement. I think it's very evident that that's the case. But if people hear something that's sincerely significantly alarming, the very first thing you've got to do is test it. And then if it doesn't pass the smell test, then discard it and get on with your life. Because the thing that worries me is how many people that would hear stuff, just like what I was sharing with you, that may have walked out the door and walked in front of a truck. And that can't happen.
Yeah, very well said. It's always good to think rational at the time and process the information, do your own research before jumping to any conclusions. We heard a lot of that here. Military would be going door to door. They would be blocking off streets, making sure no one can escape. The lists of horrific scenarios were endless. And it's very sad to see. And the level of fear can be debilitating. We've seen people locking themselves indoors for 6 months of end, literally trapping themselves indoors like prisoners because they're too afraid to emerge. They don't know what type of encounter, what type of situation they're going to be faced with, even at the local supermarkets. So, that's very important for people to try and keep a level head. Just like in a war zone, isn't it?
It's exactly the same thing, and I think having an army background, they teach you to think on your feet and fast and with as calm a head as you can. And so I'm very glad to have had that training. But talking about the use of the military in New Zealand, we do have that written into law. There's an operation here called Operation Protect, where the military do have the ability to be deployed, and they have been deployed to do checkpoints, road checks. They can be used to do enforcement, which they have been used to do enforcement. They are able to do door-to-door intel gathering. And so we've actually got that. And I exposed that sort of around about, I think, mid-July in 2020. I had military people leak documents to me, and I exposed it straight away. Operation Protect is the name of it. And I said, look, this is what's happening. Now, our government made out that they were just responding to the cards that they were being dealt with. And that was in July, when they had basically announced that they were going to set the system up with the military. But these papers that were given to me were operation orders that were dated in March, way back. And so what I was able to do was to expose that. But I had credible sources and credible sources of proof. I had the military documents. I had military people tell me these things. I even had a very, very senior officer send me some information about what the Navy was up to and how they were going to be doing things against human rights, against their own naval personnel. And so, not all of it is out there conspiracy stuff, but you got to prove it, and you got to go through a process of being able to test it. And if it doesn't pass the smell test, you discard it.
Yeah, some people say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A lot of people say that, but we can see the writing is on the wall. What they're laying the foundations for here is the facial recognition systems, the social crediting, the self-service checkouts. They're trying to prevent the use of cash in a lot of outlets. Are they rolling out such tactics there?
Yeah, they are. In fact, I had someone else leak some information to me a couple of weeks ago in New Zealand that a company received an email from a digital company in New Zealand that has already got the digital e-wallet ready to go, and that they're offering all the managers in this company a special deal to get their e-wallets first. And so it's coming rapidly. Strangely enough, I know the Reserve Bank of New Zealand governor, a guy called Adrian Orr, and I'm amazed he's going along with this. I really am. I'm surprised he is. You see, what they'll try and say, and just to justify it, is that New Zealand has to update its system so that it can plug into the global economy. But that's absolute rubbish. We don't need to go into a central bank digital system for that. We don't need to do that at all. But the problems that they'll create, though, is when you leave New Zealand, will your cash be accepted overseas? That's the problem. And so the links in the chain of tyranny that they bring in are all interconnected in a way that they support each other. As one link connects to one certain link, it connects to another link, which connects to another link. So you've got the ideology of the World Economic Forum, with the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And that's connected, of course, to, the central bank digital currency that they're bringing in, which is connected to, ridding the planet of dark finance, dark money, which is connected to, rewiring and resetting the entire financial system for control. And then which that, helps the global program reset into the fourth industrial revolution, which helps them to be able to enforce Agenda 2030. And so, Agenda 2030 is the master program. Everything underneath that, from my research and observations, tells me that whether it be the World Economic Forum, global. So really, in the final synopsis, each of the programs that we are seeing in the world today, the globalist agendas and programs, they all point to that apex program, which is Agenda 2030. And the reason why I say that confidently is because when you look at it, what is Agenda 2030? It's a global governance program and inventory management program to control every resource that a human needs to survive. And each of these programs that we're talking about, whether it be the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, the Central Bank Digital Currency Program, the Carbonized Economy, the climate change mitigation programs that they've got, which are tyrannical, they all point to supporting Agenda 2030, which is where the rubber hits the road. Incidentally, in Revelation chapter 13, verses 15 and 17, it talks about a system that unless you obey it, you will not be able to buy or sell. And that's how I know that we're at the end of all things, because we are now in a place where that is possible. We had the technology 20 years ago to bring in a system like this, but we didn't have the political environment in such a way where they could do it, but they have now. 9/11 wasn't big enough. The war against terrorism really are the perfect Trojan horses to destroy rights and freedoms.
Yeah, most certainly. And it is very much biblical. Do not accept the mark of the beast. We see through the patents as well, 06, 06, 06. So yeah, you do investigative research and you can start to see the tapestry reveal itself. And I believe they're becoming more brazen too with the weapons being used. And you referenced the geoengineering that's taking place. I've covered that here on the show. Climate and geoengineering governance, and the need for a human rights-based component where it allows for all this to be used. The stratospheric aerosol injections, we've seen that really amp up here, and especially over protests in Melbourne and Canberra. It seems, they really go to extensive lengths to spray over the top. We've also seen long-range acoustic devices. They're using sound cannons. I believe there was reports of an installation there in New Zealand as well, beaming through. Yes, as a combination of weapons used. We've seen people leaving a protest here. They had burnt faces, cracked lips. They had migraines, unable to hold down water. And it's virtually an act of genocide. Has there been any reports surfacing there in New Zealand of the same catastrophic scenarios taking place?
Yeah, there has been down in Wellington at the Wellington occupation protest. Mm-hmm. It was they exactly had that. People were getting sick. People were getting sunburn, cracked lips, all of those same symptoms that you're talking about. So it's very likely that is the case.
Yes, hopefully we don't see this become a permanent installment at future protests. Now, at the moment, you're directing a lot of your energy into this documentary that will be highlighting all the injustices that you've experienced, as well as Vinny. And this is going to be a very powerful film.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called River of Lies, the New Zealand Scamdemic, and it's going to basically, already what we've done with the investigation and research, what we're putting together, we're sending out the promo clips for it tonight that we've just finishing today. But already it's going to blow the government away. It's going to blow the media away and expose them as being hugely corrupt, hugely biased, but at the end of the day, very, very dangerous. And we've got a clear map that will, in the documentary, that will provide clear evidence of that. It's very exciting, and look forward to sending you a copy of it. And it'd be nice to do an interview with you as part of that documentary, actually.
Absolutely. Definitely offer you the opportunity to promote that here at We Are Change Melbourne, get as many eyes on this as possible, and really expose the corruption and what's taking place. Hopefully there'll be some small theatres there that will also screen that film, and hopefully get some justice too, because what's taken place is atrocious, and it's not a very good outlook for people that want to step into politics. They see what you've had to endure, and they really feel deterred about that. Sadly, it's like an
Yeah.
inverted reality. You try and do the right thing, you try and stand up for human rights, and you get punished. You sign over to this establishment and you push through all these agendas to destroy lives, and you get rewarded. That definitely feels like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does at times. But one of my favorite guitar players of all time, Stevie Ray Vaughan, said something really pertinent. And he said this. He said, if all you do is go around taking off people, all you do is give it up in the end. And that's a very, 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 very true statement. And these people may think that they're in the winner's circle right now, but we all have to give account to God for our actions, our behavior, our motivations, everything we've said, done, thought. Every good and bad thing that we've ever done is all going to be held into account. And these people, unless they repent and give their hearts and lives to the Lord, like I've done, they will be subject to judgment, and that's not a good place to be. So what we have to remember, Jeff, and I'm talking to myself this, is that we need to pray for these people and pray that they will have a change of heart, and develop a love for God and for people that they may not have. But if they ask God for it, He will help them develop that. But we always need to remember that these people that think they're in the winner's circle right now, they will end up giving it all up in the end. There's no great reward for sin and dishonesty like that.
Very wise words. Well, this has been a very powerful broadcast. You're an absolute hero and an inspiration to many. I wish you the best of success with your legal battles and all obstacles that present themselves. You're welcome back here on the channel anytime. Thank you once again for appearing on the program.
Jeff, it was wonderful to have an interview with you. You're a fantastic interviewer, and I look forward to interviewing you for our documentary, River of Lies, New Zealand's Scamdemic. Thanks for having me, brother.
Thank you very much. Well, that does it for another episode. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll catch you on the next show, where we expose corruption one episode at a time. Thank you.